Hello everybody, this is the final video for NRS123 for the assessments. This is assessment 3, the final examination. This assessment is worth 50% of your overall mark. Your exam timetable will be released via the student portal as it says, so I don't know the due date will be, when the exam will actually be. That will be released through the session. It will take 2 hours, the exam, and it will be an invigilated exam face to face, so you'll need to attend an exam centre and do the exam over 2 hours in person. The final examination will be 2 hours in length, held during the university's formal examination period at the end of session. The examination will consist of a mix of multiple choice questions and short answer questions based around the legal, ethical and professional themes that are covered in the subject material. So it will include things from the prescribed text, from the online modules and from the tutorials. And some questions are going to be based on clinical case studies similar to those used throughout the subject. So in the tutorials we'll have looked at lots of different real cases and I'll have asked you questions to pull those cases apart and see what they all mean. The exam will have similar sort of questions. I don't know the exact number of short answer questions yet because I haven't written the paper yet, but it will be 30 multiple choice questions and that'll be worth 30% of the exam, and the other 70% of the exam will be short answer questions. So some questions will just be straight knowledge retention and just check that you know things, but a lot of the questions will be based on here's a story, explain how this is relevant to that, explain how the nurse did get consent adequately or whatever. That's the sort of question we'll have. I'll also be releasing practice examinations as tutorial activities. So in weeks 4, week 7, week 10, the first activity of the tutorial will be a practice exam. So that will have multiple choice questions and short answer questions for you to practice and make sure that you've understood the content that you've done for the first few weeks and so on. Those practice exams will be very, very similar to what the questions in the final exam will be. So there'll be no surprises. You'll walk into an exam that's very similar to what you've been practicing in the tutorials. Because the assessment task is a formal examination, students will be provided with information about the date, time and location about the exams by the examinations office as it says. It's an important note that past examinations are not made available to students. So I haven't got past exams to show you, but I am going to give you the practice exams and they're very similar in terms of what you'll be looking at. In terms of what's possibly going to be covered in the exam, everything we've looked at from week 1 all the way through to week 10. There's nothing that's in or out of this exam, everything's in. It's going to be covering all of the learning outcomes of the subject, any of the chapters we've looked at in the textbook, any of the lecture material that's available online, all of those sort of things. So it's important to do well in this exam that you have studied all of those things. Remember that the purpose of an assessment is to determine whether the learning has happened properly. So if you skip elements of the learning, like you don't read the book, you don't go through the tutorials, you don't attend them, you don't use the material from that, if you're skipping all that stuff and trying to do the assessment items, it's likely that you'll do poorly in this exam, because I'm going to make sure that the exam tests the content in the learning vigorously. It's going to do a good rigorously. It's going to do a good job of checking whether you've actually been sort of learning across those areas. Now, if you learn better from a textbook than you do from a lecture, that's fine. Hopefully, they sort of cover similar content, and you'll find that you'll have learnt the same stuff anyway. But it's important that you've gone through all those things. You can't just decide, I'm not going to look at the textbook, I'm not going to worry about looking at the lectures, it's all not for me, I'll just turn up to tutorials every week. There will be information you will miss and you'll struggle in the exam. So it's really important for NRS123, is probably the most important thing to say about this assessment item, is that the exam will cover everything in the subject. So it's important that you've done the textbook, you've done the online tutorials, the online modules, and you've come along to the tutes each week, or at least watch the recording and absorb the content. It's interesting stuff. It's all relevant to what you're going to be doing as a registered nurse. So I encourage you to really sink your teeth into all the content. Take notes. I've seen last year lots of students were taking some really great notes each week and having a good synopsis of what they've learnt, and that's helpful. But yeah, you need to be studying for the exam. Don't ignore this subject to the detriment of for the purpose of doing well in other subjects. It's going to be a hard exam. We're going to make sure it's going to test knowledge properly. So make sure you've gone through the modules properly, and anything you're not sure about, the discussion forums again will be open, and we'll be talking about anything in the subject. In the last few weeks, I often find students will come out with some interesting questions that will sort of further extend whatever we've looked at in class, that's good. Very happy to answer those questions. And if you're unsure of exams and stuff, there'll be links in the tutorial manual that will talk you through how you might make preparations for exams, and some suggestions at the end of each tutorial for how you might be getting yourself ready for exam prep. Because it's not something, if you have not done an exam for a really long time, it's not something you want to wander in and be absolutely thrown by the setting of the exam, because you won't do your best effort. You want to make sure that the exam process is going to be scary because it's an assessment, and that's fine, but you want to minimise how much that affects you. So you can do things to prepare yourself for the exam setting. You can go through the practice exams again. You can make yourself confident that you're capable of doing this exam well, and go and give it your best effort. So that's really all there is to say about it. The rubric's fairly straightforward. If you get 0 to 50 or 0 to 49.5, you'll fail the exam, but not necessarily the subject. So again, you only need to get 50% overall. This means that if you do really well, if you put time and effort into assessment 1, for example, it's only worth 15%, but if you put time and effort in and write a really good paper for that, and then you put time and effort into assessment 2, you can come into the exam fairly confident that you're going to pass the subject. If you leave it till the last minute with both of those first assessments and submit things that aren't your best work, and then you need to catch up marks in the exam, you might struggle to pass the subject. So it makes sense to hedge your bets a bit by putting in lots of effort into your written papers, and then come into the exam fairly confident that you'll pass the subject. It's all fairly straightforward exam rules. They've got written in the subject outline though, so you'll have a multiple choice question that you can fill in, the answer sheet. There'll be the exam paper that you can write on. And no, you won't be able to take the exam paper with you. I need to mark it, so it'll come through to the markers. We'll need to retain the paper, so you won't be able to take that with you. You'll be able to bring some pencils with you, a couple of pens, an eraser. You can bring a calculator if you want to, but you won't need one for the assessment. And you won't be allowed to have mobile phones in the exam. That's about it, really. There's other things about making sure, other things about generally for assessment information about the integrity and all that sort of stuff that you need to be doing to make sure that you're not accused of academic misconduct. That's really important. But otherwise, it's going to be a fairly straightforward 2-hour exam that covers all the content of the subject. If you've got any questions about it, feel free to jump on the discussion board and ask me. Thanks, guys.